Welcome to Heart Riffing, a podcast by way of the heart. Here we explore what it means to reconnect with your essence and live from a place of personal freedom. If you're interested in learning more about our courses, mentoring and workshops, feel free to visit wayoftheheart.com.au. We're so glad you're here and we hope you enjoy the episode. Hi and welcome back to Heart Riffing. I'm Jess and this is Bello. And today I thought we would do an episode that kind of follows on from our previous episode where we looked at internal versus external referencing. But when we did that, we kind of looked at internal, external referencing as something that we personally do. But we also live and interact with lots of other people who might not always be internally referenced, or they might be perpetually externally referenced. So I kind of wanted to delve into that topic today.
Yeah, cool. Great. So maybe what will set this up a little bit easier for all of us is just to remind us that when we're talking about internal and external referencing, we're talking about someone who derives their identity or their sense of well-being, their sense of security, the sense of all those kind of fundamental things that we need. An externally referenced person seeks to source all of that from outside themselves. And an internally referenced person is someone who doesn't reject outside kind of data or input or relational connection, but someone who fundamentally sources their sense of identity from their own essence, from their own being. And so that's really what we mean when we're talking about internally and externally referenced. So that kind of sets it up. So then when we're talking about this and it's obvious we're going to come into contact with a lot of people, and we have many times come into contact with people who basically view the world as a place where, because they're externally referenced, view the world as a place where they have to firm up who they are. They have to firm up their sense of worth, their sense of value, their sense of all those things. And that can be a draining dynamic, which is what we want to talk about, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's this funny thing too, where the more internally referenced you become, the more you start to find who you are in you and in your essence as opposed to outwardly, the more you can see the opposite happening in other people. But just because you might be at a certain place doesn't mean that everybody else is. And it also doesn't give you entitlement to tell people that they're doing it wrong and that they should be doing it differently.
Which is a really important point, right?
Yeah, right. Do you want to talk more about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a point that a lot of spiritual mentors will say is that just because someone's in their ego, and it could be anyone, it could be, not just a stranger, but someone that you're really close to. Someone's ego journey is their ego journey. Someone's maybe Ram Dass would say that someone's life curriculum is their life curriculum, and you can't. He would say it's a really important lesson to realize that you can't step across and interfere with that curriculum, especially uninvited. Right. So maybe a really good rule of mentoring is, your mentor or your coach or your therapist isn't meant to. This is why therapy is interesting, because the therapist isn't there to inflict you with their perspective, right? And it's a good thing to remember, that we're not in the business. Way of the Heart's not even in the business of uninvitedly, stepping into a situation and trying to interfere with someone. So if someone's in their ego, they're in their ego. Yeah. So if someone's externally referencing and they're scoping the external space for validation and a whole bunch of things and playing the ego games of bigger, better, best, or the reactive games of I don't like what you said, or that's okay, but that doesn't immediately give me a right to step across that.
Yeah.
So nothing that we would say today is kind of would tick that box and say, just confront them. Like, hell no, don't do that. Yeah. That's uncaring.
Yeah, this is hard though, because I think it's easy to rationalize this. It's easy to go, yeah, sure, I shouldn't step across and confront someone and tell them to do this, that, or the other. But then in everyday life, when you are dealing with somebody like that, it's really hard. It's hard to maintain your own sense of internal referencing when somebody else is clearly externally referencing. And it's also difficult when you see that happen in a couple of different ways. Either they're externally referencing and they're wanting something from you or wanting something from other people, or they're externally referencing and they're projecting a fear or a narrative onto you. So, how do you deal with the complexities of that whilst maintaining your own grounding?
Yeah, well, I mean, we can, we're talking about fundamental human dynamics, and there's always a complexity with them. So we're not going to come up with a 5-point plan for dealing with, externally referenced people trying to leverage stuff off us. Maybe one of the things you just hinted at it is that when you're internally referenced, you're fundamentally at a structural level playing a different game. Like you're not like whatever the externally referenced person is doing at a fundamentally systematic or structural level, you are operating when you're internally referenced, you are operating from a different structure. You're operating from a different system. The two systems are completely different. The internally referenced person is not out there farming their value, farming their worth, scanning the horizon for what they need, controlling the environment for what they need to control, because they're just not playing that game. And so the idea here is that if you realize that this is a structural systems process, you just realize that there's no point in time where I'm coming to play that. There's no point in time where structurally I'm shifting. Like I'm just not, that's not something that I'm going to do at a structural level. So I think the first thing is to have some awareness of the nature of what's going on. They're two completely different systems. They operate according to two completely different modes of operation. They have completely different things that they're centered on. It's interesting because when you're internally referenced, the idea is not just the idea, but the reality of it is it's not that you don't take on board outside information, right?
Yeah.
But you probably have been a lot more discerning about who you allow to speak into your life and who you don't allow to speak into your life. So if I go into the office and there's, Carl, good old Carl,
We always pick on Carl.
we pick on Carl.
Because we don't know a Carl at all.
I don't know any. I know one Carl. But there's Carl, and he's the guy that needs everyone to like him, or he's the guy that in the meeting that needs everyone to agree with him, and you don't agree with him, and you know that he's going to take that personally. When you're playing the different game, the reality for you is it's not personal. It's like this isn't a personal deal. So there is no argument to have. There is nothing to defend. The internally referenced person isn't defending anything. There's nothing to defend. There is no ground to be won. There's no victory to secure. There's no higher point to get to. Because Carl has all of that.
Yeah.
He would feel like you're taking ground off him if you disagree. Yeah. That you're an enemy, that you're not an ally, that you're a threat, not a source of support. That you're against him.
Yeah, but then what do you do when Carl's coming at you with all of that? Because that happens, right?
It does happen. But I guess what we're saying is that if you maintain your ground of being, which is an internally referenced thing, the short answer is that there's nothing really there to respond to with Carl. Like you can even say, "Hey, Carl, this isn't personal. Hey, there's no winner or loser here. I just have a different perspective. I appreciate your perspective," or if that's what you feel, that's what you feel. Like you don't need to convince him. So I would say a couple of really fundamental things is number one, you maintain the ground of your own being. You stay centered in who you are. Again, that's like you'll push back and go, well, that's easier said than done. I don't think any of this stuff is necessarily easy. But you stay centered in the ground of your own being. The second thing is there's no argument. So because you're not playing from that system, there's no contest. If it's an ego game, it's like, okay, you win. Like I try not to play ego games anymore because just, okay, you win. You're
Yeah.
faster.
It's a zero-sum game, yeah.
Yeah, you're faster. You're better. You've got more likes. You've got more listeners. You've got more reach. Like even with Way of the Heart, you find with Way of the Heart, there's kind of a singular disinterest in actually doing all the stuff that, like an online, a business that's offering stuff online. There's a reluctance to call ourselves a business. There's
Yeah.
there's a reluctance to go online. There's a reluctance to play the social media game.
Mm.
The reason that we do all of this is because of a desire to serve and support and love people, not a desire to become number one in class.
Mm.
I mean, I remember speaking to one guy, and he goes, I want to have the number one podcast in Australia. Like, okay, that's an external game.
Yeah.
That's a completely external reference marker. When you're not playing that game, that marker becomes irrelevant.
Mm.
Do you get what I'm saying?
I do. I feel like my role in a lot of these conversations is
back.
to play devil's advocate
Sure.
and, try and voice what I think people might be thinking. But so my natural response to that is, but surely there are goals that you should have, particularly when you're pursuing something that is really valuable and important to you. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, for sure.
Way of the Heart's really important to me, and I want it to do well. So I have to have some type of external marker, but that shouldn't come at the expense of the ground of my being or my essence or my sense of value.
Yeah, and I think we're talking about. I mean, I always like it when we talk in our more advanced course about bliss, and we talk about the micro perspective and the macro perspective, and that and so from that, the difference between looking, through a microscope and seeing the most infinitesimal element, and then scanning back and scanning back and scanning back until you're looking through a telescope at this vast vista that's just so huge you can't take it all in. So one is the micro perspective, one is the macro perspective. I think in this kind of conversation, because you've firmed up the micro perspective and you firmed that up for yourself, it's easy just to go, this isn't a game that I want to play.
Yeah.
I don't need a win here.
Mm-hmm.
And you go to the macro perspective, and the macro perspective might be Way of the Heart, for example, exists just to serve and to help as many people as possible walk the way of the heart. That's about as macro as it gets. That's the only game we're really interested in.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be the number one podcast. I don't necessarily need 4 million followers. I don't want to be on Oprah. I don't want to be, like there's none of that, all those kind of little markers,
But Oprah, if you want us, give us a call.
Yeah, swing away. But it's none of that.
Yeah.
It's none of the micro game. Whereas you'll find that, Carl, to use our lovely Carl, is playing a real micro game because he's externally referenced, at every small area of his life, he's got to go and outsource that.
Yeah.
So he's got to get that victory.
Yeah.
He's got to win that point. He's got to win that argument. He's got to assert that opinion. He's got to react like that. He's got to fire up. He's got to get offended, because there's so many areas of his life that just aren't shored up unless he can firm up the external ground. So the structural game that he would be playing is, I have to go out there every day and fight for everything that I get. Everything starts to fall into win-lose. Everything starts to fall into right-wrong. Everything's, in a way, what I'm essentially saying is that for the externally referenced person, there are the binary categories: in, out, right, wrong, good, bad, of me, not of me, friend, enemy, supporter, detractor. And so because when you're internally referenced and you've firmed up that territory for yourself, then you're not having to play micro binary games. You're not having to look at your world. Someone can come along with a different opinion to you, and you can go, okay,
cool,
that's your opinion. I'm okay with you having a different opinion to me.
Yeah.
You can come along and someone can be upset with you, and you go, that's okay, I get it.
Yeah.
The other thing that you can do when you're internally referenced is you can be wrong. You You can go, that's okay. My whole personhood doesn't collapse under being wrong about an issue. Like when you've firmed up and you become internally referenced, what happens is it's not that you become impervious to criticism. It's not that you don't take stuff on. It's the fact that you just go, if I am wrong, or if I've done something bad, or if I'm not on point, I'm sufficiently secure in myself and grounded in my own being to take on board that criticism. That's okay.
Mm.
And if I've done something wrong, you're sufficiently able to take responsibility. You're sufficiently able to apologize. You're sufficiently able, because your whole identity isn't wed to this idea that I needed to be right in that moment, and they're clearly wrong. So you're not defending the territory. Does that resonate or not so much?
No, it really does. It completely resonates. I think when we put this into practice in our interactions with other people, when we're slightly disconnected from that person, it's easy. So in a work environment, I'm happy to be wrong. Do you know what I mean? Or, with friends who I don't really care about, or, they're loose acquaintances or whatever, it doesn't really matter. But I think that this gets harder and harder the closer somebody is to you, right?
Yeah.
So when you're dealing with a partner or a really close friend or a parent, like a family member, it's a lot harder when they're they're externally referenced and they're projecting something onto you that is coming from that external place.
Yeah.
It's not accurate or representative of who you are or what's going on.
Yeah.
And then I feel like it gets really easy to get pulled into, hang on, you're not seeing me. How can you not see me? How can I how can I get you out of this external place? And it becomes a lot more messy at that point.
I think so. I mean, of course it does, you know what I mean? And there's always in those interactions a certain heat and a certain dynamic, I think you're completely right. For me, and, I can't say that I've done this. I mean, I can say that this is still something that I'm learning to do ongoingly, right? But I find great comfort in some of the old wisdom traditions, things like the Taoists who say, can you remain still and let the mud settle? Or in the Wengzi where it says, calm is clarity, disturbance is chaos. Again, it's borrowing from the water metaphor where if the water's all muddy and you just keep disturbing the water, right, the mud keeps being stirred up.
Yeah.
When you stop and you're still and you just go, okay, then the mud settles. Or you think of the lake, the beautiful lake, and while it's disturbed by the wind, you can't see through the water. It's all ripples. It's all. So the disturbance is a form of chaos, and everything's moving, and you can't really see anything. But when the wind of reaction or the wind of ego stops blowing and the surface gets still, then it becomes clear. So disturbance leads to more chaos. Calmness leads to greater clarity. Can you calm yourself sufficiently so that the mud settles or the surface? I think these kind of ancient wisdom pieces are brilliant because, and again, it's the micro perspective. It's like, if I have to win this debate in the moment, in the micro perspective, if this is a drop down, duke it out between you and me in this moment, then the fact is it's all disturbance. Nothing. And what you will have happened is that your center of gravity, your ground of being will have shifted into completely, you will have made a systems shift where you're no longer playing the internally referenced game, you're now externally referenced as well. So instead of staying grounded in your own ground of being, you'll find that you've been dragged out into, and now you're out here. And so now you're subject to all the things that this system introduces, right? And the system introduces the need to win, the need to be right, the need to leverage arguments through the ego, the need to create really compelling stories to outdo the other person's really compelling story, the need to, if need be, the need to be emotional and offended more than the other person. you know, the need to ramp up the motion to righteous indignation. How dare you, you know? Okay, great, but that's such a micro game. And then I often do this with people. I often say, tell me what your heart says. And then they go, well, what? And I go, no, that's an emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And they go, well, what I was thinking is this, and then they go into their story. And I go, that's a great story, but I'm not asking what your mind is creating. I'm not asking for your story.
Yeah.
You know, well, no, that's your ego speaking. You know, they did this, I did, you know, they shouldn't have. Yeah, okay, great. You're offended. I get it. You know, what does your heart say? Do you, especially when it's people close to you, in your heart of hearts, in this moment, do you actually love this person?
Yeah.
And they might say in the moment, no, bloody frustrate, you know, they might react, right? And you go, I don't think that's true.
But I feel like too, if you're at that point where you feel like you're hijacked to the point where you can't access that heart space, that's a really good sign that you just need to stop.
You need to tap out.
You need to completely stop and just withdraw from the situation until you can come down out of that fight, flight, freeze space and just and reconnect to the ground of your being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's completely true. I think you stop. And I think if, you know, like, because so often you can jump into the macro just by asking the heart-based question. What do you, in your heart of hearts, what do you really feel? It could be in your heart of hearts, what do you really feel? Do you think this situation can work itself out? Yeah. Or maybe it's the opposite. No, I don't think it will. Okay, well, if you don't think it'll work out, then what's the right course of what is, you know, what you know, Chinese wisdom says, you know, allow right action. You know, allow right action to appear or to emerge or to become apparent, right? Okay, so if you don't think this is going to resolve itself, what's the right action? Do you need to remove yourself? Do you need to let it go? Do you need to, you know, whatever the right action is? You know, for me, a lot of the time, the right action is, as you said, just stop, just stop. That goes to our definition of peace, right?
It does.
You know,
also in our advanced course.
Yeah, I mean, our definition of peace in 12 Heart Secrets, the secret to peace, I'll give it to you now. The secret to peace begins with stopping.
Yeah.
You know, Packham is, you know, is an agreement between one another, but you're never going to get that agreement between one another while you're still firing shots. So it has to begin with, stopping. Stop shooting. Stop firing.
Yeah.
Stop being triggered.
Yeah.
So I would say number one, you know, think about this in a structural perspective.
Yeah.
In a system, you know, an externally referenced person is playing by a different structure with a different system. An internally referenced person has a completely different structure and a completely different system.
And the power behind that understanding is
that the secret when we're dealing with massively or with externally referenced people is that we realize that a big part of the game or a big part of the challenge is not to abandon our own structure and abandon our own system and be pulled out into a space be pulled out into a system or a structure that has nothing to do with us. I don't, you know, this one is macro focus, this one is micro focus. This one is binary. It creates ins, out, right, wrong, goods, bad. This one is not binary. It includes everyone, especially self and others, and it allows others to be other. I can be the handle of the knife. You can be the blade of the knife. We're very different, but we're one. You know, it's that kind of grounded awareness. Now, when you start to bring that into a relationship, everything shifts. You know, I mean, that's some of the way that I do it. And that kind of leads to not arguing, to, you know, not entering into arguments because there's no point. You know, I mean, you know, you've watched me for years. I've debated people on stuff.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
Yeah.
It doesn't work because even if you win the debate or even if you win the argument, people kind of resent you anyway.
Yeah.
Because they feel invalidated.
Especially if they're still externally referenced.
Yeah, they don't just go, oh wow, that's incredible. Thank you for shifting my perspective.
Yeah, no.
You know, do they?
No, not at all.
I don't think
Never.
that's ever happened to me.
No, entire political systems are built off the
No,
back of that.
yeah. It's like if the Conservatives have a good position, and it's not like the more liberal left wing just go, that's brilliant.
Thank you.
You guys are tremendous.
Well done. You guys, you got this.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. We're going to adopt their position because it's so well thought through. I mean, their position was so much better than ours. No one does that. In a binary food fight,
Yeah.
you know, and maybe that's a really good analogy. Have you ever, when we talk about holding your peace and not operating according to those systems, you ever seen those movies where like two people are kind of frustrated with each other and they're in a, you know, they might be chefs and they're in a kitchen? You know,
This is so niche.
yeah. But you know, like one of them gets a bit of potato on the end of the spoon and goes, and then you see in the smack, you know, and that person, instead of just going, oh, that's just so immature.
Yeah. They grab like a spoon
they
of
pick
gravy.
up a tomato and they throw it, and then you know, I mean, it's those classic Hollywood scenes, and you know what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, the owner of the restaurant walks in, and there's like the kitchen is chaos, disarray, food everywhere. No, you know, and the piece de la resistance is the owner goes, really? And then gets hit in the head with
that's it by someone who's still
yeah. I mean, that's what it feels like, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what the externally referenced game is, I reckon.
So all this is like well and good. We've got a couple of, I don't know, techniques or strategies, but you and I both know people who are, I would say, destructively externally referenced.
Completely.
To the point where it negatively impacts relationships, and you can't just completely write them off, can you? Like, so I don't know, what do you do? This is on a deeper level, and I know that I'm kind of talking about what I've touched on before, but I mean, shit, what do you do with someone like that?
I've got a couple of people that you can send down there to sort that out.
Awesome, great.
Yeah, Lefty and three toes. He'll go. No,
if all else fails.
Well, again, you know, like maybe again, this will be such a way of the heart answer, is that there's situations where we're going to be in relationship with people, or we're going to be in the orbit of people who you can't get a win with. You know, this is the idea of the complexity of the ecosystem. In the ecosystem, you know, there are things which are fundamentally adversarial, and they sit in opposition. There are people who, in my world, have been kryptonite to me. You know, there's a book somewhere in my bookshelf there, you know, about about the nature of psychopaths, and it basically says with someone who's, you know, psychopathic, or, you know, a lot of the self-help stuff will say narcissistic personality disorder or whatever it is. You know, I'm not an expert on any of that, but in this particular book, it said being in the room with a psychopath is like being in the room with like a rabid Rottweiler. You know what I mean? The best thing to do is just to get out of the room.
Got it. Yep.
It's like I have people in my life, like I said, that are kryptonite for me, and the best thing for me to do is to just go, you know, sometimes I have to go and be with them, and the best thing to do when I have to go and be with them is just to go, okay,
yeah,
be awake here.
Yeah.
You know, that this can deteriorate really quickly.
Yeah. I think that's a way of the heart answer too, because it doesn't promise anything is going to be easy suddenly. And I think that a lot of the times when you really do know who you are and you really are grounded in yourself, there are relationships that you look at and you go, this is actually untenable.
Yeah.
Or this can't continue in the dynamic that it has continued, and I actually need to step back. And I think that leaning into the truth of that is sometimes a lot harder than just conforming for the sake of conforming, or letting it continue because there's a history of continuing. I mean, ultimately it's more painful to be somewhere that you shouldn't be. But I think leaning into that complexity and that pain essentially is...
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a very way of the heart comment, because we never promise that, you know, there's a kind of, I like to use the word Pollyanna. I don't really know why, but it's that there is never kind of this perfect, there almost is never this kind of perfect, this quintessentially, amazing answer to everything, like this is the one, take this one pill, it cures everything. It's more like Neo's pill, take this pill, welcome, look,
welcome to the,
check out what reality is really like. But I think we're not necessarily saying that, but I mean, there are people there that are so externally referenced and have been externally referenced their whole life. And, you can become really skilled at being externally referenced. You can be, you can be, I mean, the three categories I think are helpful, Emotionally, externally referenced people who are emotional are going to be reactive. They're going to get offended. They're going to get triggered. They're going to be, they're going to be in that emotional dysregulated state. Do you know what I mean? Externally referenced people who are heavily in their head are going to basically be masters of argument, masters of storytelling, masters of my perspective is better than yours. I know more than you. This is the way that it is. Great at creating one-way lanes that you go down, and it's like if you adopt their formula. Lots of situations like that. I mean, a lot of formal religion is like that. X plus Y equals, and then if you believe the structure of the formula, you end up with their answer, right? And so some people are great at creating those kind of very structured, formulaic ways of thinking. And if you start thinking like that, all of a sudden you start going, "Wow, I'm they're right, I'm wrong." But you know in your heart that you're not.
Yeah.
And the last thing about ego is that when someone's in their ego, that basically they have to win, right? They have to win because it's a win-lose. It's a win-lose situation for them. It's a binary situation. They're not looking to come to a point of agreement.
Yeah.
They're looking to come to a point of victory.
Yeah.
Right?
Doesn't that, this is not way of the heart at all, but for me sometimes there's a petty part of me that's like, you want to go, let's go. You want to compete, let's compete.
Yeah, but what part of you is that?
Probably not the ground of my being.
Well, and probably not your heart either. Probably that's just ego, right?
Yeah.
If we're honest about it. And we're not saying, why the heart's never saying that you don't get into your ego, right? Or we don't eviscerate physical, emotional, mental, and egoic energies. What we're just saying is all those energies need to pivot around heart energy, right? As a heart energy as a source. Because what I don't want to be doing is getting to a point where I've won an argument through the acuity of my brain and all the clever arguments, and then I turn around and you go, great, you won that argument, and that person is more alienated from you now than they were before.
Yeah.
And my heart goes, that's a bad outcome.
Yeah.
You didn't need to win the argument.
Yeah.
You didn't need to lock them up in your logic.
Yeah.
I've done that, a lot of my early religious life was about defending constructs. You know what I mean? A lot of my early spirituality was about defending constructs and just going, there's no heart in this. It's purely doctrinal.
Yeah.
It's purely about trying to manipulate people's belief systems, right? And if you could manipulate their belief system and they agreed with you, which sometimes they did, most of the time they didn't, then you felt good about yourself because. Yeah, so that's a horrible way to live.
Yeah.
I don't want to live like that anymore.
Absolutely. I think this leads actually to one of the way of the heart values as well, especially with dealing with people who are externally referenced, is the value of loving kindness.
Yeah, sure.
I think that at some point, yes, there's the awareness of the frame, the different, structure, there's the, peace and the let's just stop, but there also has to be an extension of loving kindness, right? Where you just go, how and not a permissive loving kindness where I'll let you walk all over me and you're all good, but a robust, discernment of what is the what is something.
I think that's a great observation. I guess for me, sometimes loving kindness takes lots of different shapes. Loving kindness isn't just this thing about, being gentle. I think
Right.
loving kindness is gentle, but sometimes loving kindness just says, oh, well, um, this might be where we part.
Yeah.
This might be where I give you space to do you. This might be the space where I put in a boundary, because if I let you keep accessing me like this, it's going to create tension between us. And the most generous thing that I can possibly do is put in a boundary to stop this kind of access. I mean, I always loved that book, Boundaries. It was an old book back in the 80s, and it talked about the fact that boundaries in people's lives were, good boundaries, good neighbors. It didn't mean that you couldn't have a gate in the fence, but if there was the fence between me and my neighbor, you could have a gate in it and people could come in and out freely through the fence. But sometimes you needed to close the gate because you needed to be clear that what was on this side of the fence was my responsibility and what was on that side of the fence was your responsibility. So, so if the grass was growing really long over there, I might think, gee, that should be cut. But it's actually my neighbor's grass. It's not mine. It's not my responsibility to do that. Now, I can ask him, do you want a hand? I can offer a helping hand and to support him in whatever, if he for whatever reason. But the reality is what's on that side of the fence is his stuff, and what's on this side of the fence is my stuff.
Yeah.
And yes, we can have a gate, but if things get out of control, we might need to close the gate and say,
totally.
hey, dude,
Yeah.
I'm going to stay over here and I'm going to take care of my program.
Yeah.
You stay over there and you take care of your program. And maybe we open the gate a little bit later on.
Yeah.
But let's get some clarity about what I'm responsible for and what you're responsible for. That's a very loving model. It's a really, really loving model. It is a robust model, because it creates distinction between your space and my space. Sometimes that's a very, very loving thing to do. So loving kindness isn't just this kind of delicate, gentle, it's not just the kindly old, kindly old person that goes, there, dear,
Yeah.
It's sometimes it's the robust person that says, no,
Yeah.
we don't go any further here.
Yeah, this is like I remember you and Boss disciplining us as kids, and you always said, we do this because we love you.
Yeah.
And as kids, we were like, what the hell? Like, you don't love me. But like now as an adult, I understand that, the boundaries and the conversations and all of that was out of a place of love in a robust way.
Yeah.
Because, I think that loving kindness is not permissive. It doesn't permit everying. And if we permitted everything as kids, then that wouldn't have been loving kindness.
No, it can't. Yeah, because that's when, you don't educate your kid to listen to you and to take what you say seriously. Then what happens is, you're standing beside a busy highway and you tell your child, hold my hand, and they don't, and you tell them not to go out on the road and they step out. I mean, it's a recipe for disaster. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, in that case, the robust parenting, I will say this, that the robust parenting should never just be about controlling another person, even a kid, right? Even a little person. And that in the process of having that, I think, even in the process of bringing discipline to relationships, including as a parent, we always tried to articulate the principle behind what we were doing. Right. So this is a really interesting conversation, because a lot of the time we legislate stuff, but we don't educate what the legislation is for, right?
Totally.
So a lot of the time we say, well, I'm bringing in this boundary, I'm bringing in this rule, or I'm taking this approach to this person. Well, what's the principle behind that? Why do we drive at 40 kilometers an hour through a school zone? Because we have to, because if you drive at 60, you're going to get booked. No, silly. We drive at 40 k's an hour through a school zone because we're trying to protect the life of kids coming out of school between the times of 2:30 and 4 o'clock. So the law, the precept, the boundary, serves a higher end. When you just give someone the boundary and they don't know the thing that it's serving, the principle, the higher end, the value that it's serving, then the boundary seems mean and nasty. So you can do this. You can say to someone, listen, I'm just going to pull back here because it feels like I trigger you. It feels like this has moved into a combative space, and I don't want to argue with you. You can do it really nicely, and you can go back to. I've gone back to people who I know I have who I know I've put a boundary in place with, or I've pulled back from, and I go, "How are you going with us? Are we okay?" I've checked in with them, And normally, when you check in a little bit later down the road, they go, "Yeah, we're okay. It was a tough situation, blah, 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 blah." And you go, "Yeah, it was, man, but I value you." You can affirm them, you know what I mean? Which kind of might play into their external referencing. But, that's not your problem, You can affirm them because you can affirm them as a person, that they're a valuable person, but you still keep the boundary, right?
Totally.
You
Yeah, absolutely. I like that point on the clarity as to the why too. Because I think that, particularly if you've been in a tense situation, the knee jerk reaction is, well, I'm going to put in a boundary. But then that's not done in a way that is actually, I don't know, respectful or honoring of the relationship. And it's coming from the ego, it's coming from the emotion in a way because you're putting it in, you're not explaining
Yeah.
anything.
Well, I think that's exactly right. And I think sometimes, the way that this works in my life is I go back to my spiritual practice, right? Now, way of the heart, spirituality is always inwardness, right? It's always going back to the ground or the core or the essence of your own being. We never evoke the idea of spirituality as a theistic construct. You can have that, but that's not our definition of spirituality. So my spiritual practices are designed to take me back to the ground of my own being. What I will do is I will go back to one of my key spiritual practices is journaling. I get up early in the morning, make a cup of tea, have a shower, make a cup of tea, sit down with a journal, put some music on, and I just write for the better part of maybe an hour. And sometimes in my journal, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get to my heart. I'm trying to get to, this kind of central energy inside of me that tells me, this is what I want you to do. And so when I get to that energy, it almost always is very clear. It's almost always really simple what it says. And so inevitably I go, okay, that's what I got to do. I've got to do that piece. That's what I've got to bring to this situation. That's what I've got to bring to this person. Whether it's awareness that when sometimes it's like, sometimes my heart will just say, hey, listen, you're going to go and hang out with this person. That they're massively externally referenced and they're combative. Yeah, I do know that. How do I deal with that? And in my heart might just go, it's okay.
Yeah, right.
It's okay. You're not going to get lost today. You don't need their approval, but it might say that. Or sometimes, I've gone, oh, this situation seems to be flaring up. I really don't know what to do. And my heart will just go, just sit and watch it. There's nothing for you to do. This is not about you. It's like, just sit and watch it. It's almost a completely antithetical thing. It's like, I don't need to fix it. I don't need to heal it. I don't need to step in. No, just sit and watch. If you try and play in this space, it's going to collapse on you like an avalanche of snow and you're going to get buried. Okay.
Yeah.
Good point. Back away from the vehicle, Well, sometimes I'll be writing it and it might be, in my heart, it's like, no, you need to apologize. You've got work to do here, what you said, blah, it's like, so you go back to the heart space and the heart space will have a perspective. And then I think you got to live out, that's where, if you don't live out the heart perspective, then what you do is that you're moving out of the ground of your own being and you're not moving out of your essence. You're shifting from that. And then if you find yourself defending, if your heart tells you to do something like you need to apologize and take ownership here, and you're going, no way. And you go, yeah. Look at that.
Yeah.
Looky. Not living way of the heart now.
Yeah.
Living some other game.
Not being internally referenced
Not
anymore.
being internally referenced. And then you can ask yourself the question, so what are you defending?
Yeah.
Why are you afraid to be wrong?
Yeah.
Why are you afraid to say sorry? What are you holding on to? And again, the heart is on. I find in my life, my heart is almost never silent about that.
Yeah. Totally.
You know, oh, you think that you're this guy, you're pretending to be this guy, but that's not really who you are.
Yeah.
And the more you try and pretend to be that guy, the worse this is going to get, not just for you, but for everyone.
Yeah.
Because everyone's going to have to respond to you like that. And if they don't, you're going to get upset. Like, oh, yeah, okay.
It's funny because earlier on in the conversation, you had said, look, we're not going to come up with 5 ways to deal with externally referenced people. But I mean, throughout the course of this conversation, we've got, I think we actually do have 5. We have being aware of the different structures. We've got stopping, non-doing.
Yeah.
We've got loving kindness, clarity with boundaries, and returning to the ground of your being, or returning to your essence.
Yeah, well, that's good.
So you're welcome, listeners.
Yeah. Yes, nice.
We're that good.
Yeah. Beautiful.
But yeah, no, I feel like that wraps it up pretty well. I think we've covered.
And maybe the 6th point.
Oh,
because
bonus.
5 is horrible. Because 6 is a prettier number. Maybe the 6th point is the quintessential way of the heart thing, and that is, the goal is not perfection.
Ooh, that is a good one.
The goal is not to not have messy relationships. The goal is not to demand that people be perfect. The goal is to allow imperfection. And I really like the Greek word. Perfect in the Greek did not mean, without blemish or spotless, or, it didn't mean quintessence or, no problem whatsoever, completely formed. Perfect was this idea of, in the Koine Greek, perfect was mature, right? Sometimes I think in our mind, we create this straw man, which is kind of addicted to the fact that it should be this, which is our form of perfection.
Yeah.
Right. Well, if maybe it should be that, but it's not that.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually down here somewhere. It's this. And let's just shift the dial. So we're not looking for what it should be. We're not entering into that projection, but we're just saying this is where it's at, and this thing needs to mature. So if there's a movement towards perfect, it's a movement towards maturity. And I like the word maturity for perfect, because maturity evokes the idea that this thing is getting richer.
Yeah. If
we allow this to sit in a particular way, if we position this in our heart and hold this with reverence and grace and loving kindness, this relationship can get richer. It may not be there yet. This person can get more free. This person can be loved. And it may not be there now, but it doesn't mean that it can't shift. So not holding things with our very Western idea of it should be this, and it's not, because that invokes all of the angst, and so then you become, sometimes my protest about institutional religion is because I'm still coming out of this. It should have done this. It should have embraced the poor. It should have, been inclusive. It should have been generous. It should have been this, and this. And it's like, dude, yeah. And is there any evidence of that anywhere in any place you can find? It's like, no. Yeah. Well, okay, then your protest about what it should be is ill-founded, and you need to peel it back and just allow it to be what it is.
Yeah.
And then respond to it out of a more loving, kind, and gracious space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Okay. 6 points.
That's it. Thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to Heart Riffing. If today's conversation resonated, you can find more of our work, including courses, mentoring, and workshops, at www.wayoftheheart.com.au or on our Instagram, Way of the Heart Official. We'd love to hear your thoughts, reflections, or questions, so please always feel free to message or comment. We look forward to seeing you next time.